From hundreds of nominations from across the country, we selected the bottom 8, the absolute worst of the worst. We've got Chris, who was nominated by his wife, Michelle.
Every show, the drivers will attempt to complete several different challenges designed to test and improve their driving skills. At the end of every episode, starting next week, the most improved driver will be released back into the wild. When the 8 weeks are up, only one person will remain, and that person will be branded with the dubious title of Canada's worst driver.
The first challenge for our 8 nominees is simply to make it to our driver rehabilitation center. Once they get going, our awful 8 must find this ferry and use it to get to a remote island in Lake Ontario. From there, it's a straightforward drive along Highway 7. If they don't get lost, they'll run into this midway checkpoint where they must identify the livestock. Alpacas. After that, it's on to Highway 8, which will take our candidates to a decommissioned military base near the town of Picton. This base will be their new home, the Driver Rehabilitation Center, a boot camp for bad drivers. It's not meant to be fun, and no one will get to go home until we say so. We've given Canada's worst drivers local maps and detailed instructions. All told, the trip should take an hour and a half, but with this crowd, it could easily take all day.
You'll end up in the lake if you overshoot it, so you'll be okay.
Great. I'm trying to concentrate on what my foot's doing, what my hands are doing. Then all of a sudden I'm not looking at the road.
Manuel and his co-pilot, Alex, are right on the speed limit, holding a steady course, which is more than I can say for Chris and his stressed-out wife, Michelle.
How fast are you supposed to be going?
Well, I'm trying to keep it around 80.
Okay, but that's not 80.
I can't feel the accelerator. Like, these hiking routes are not great.
13 years ago, Chris learned to drive and he got his license. Then he stopped driving completely.
Oh,
For him,
Chris.
being behind the wheel feels like trespassing.
I just don't know where my foot is on the pedal. I can't feel it. I'm wearing boots.
I would feel safer in the car with Chris if he was in the back seat. Why did you do that?
Do what?
Keep slamming on the brakes. It hurts my neck.
We got married in 2001, and we've been living here since.
2002.
Oh, pardon me, 2002. Michelle is most of the time very understanding.
You good boy, stay.
Will kid me around a lot and joke about it, which helps to deal with it. Right?
I didn't mean to do that.
Nice.
I might be Canada's worst driver because if I get out on the road, I have the full capacity to possibly kill someone.
Stop laughing.
Oh, there's somebody ahead of us.
Back on the highway, Faith Ann is now stuck behind Heather.
Speed limit was 80 and I just topped out at 60.
Like a crack addict taking one last hit before going to jail, Faith Ann passes on the double yellow line.
Oh, guess who's coming up?
Faith Ann is in an awful hurry to get to the rehab center.
That was illegal.
Yeah, no, I know. You can't cross the double yellow. I understand that.
Without a scratch, Chris arrives at the rehab center.
You know what? I actually thought he was going to come last. He's a safe guy. He's not one of these guys that's going to be going 140 passing in the ditch. Which is not to say that he won't be in the ditch, but... Welcome. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
You made it. Drop your keys in there. We'll hand them back to you when you graduate. So, let's move on to our second challenge. As our participants have shown, driving, that's easy. Stopping before you hit something, that's a totally different story, particularly in a blizzard. For our next challenge, we're going to ask Canada's worst drivers to come to a screeching halt. This wall of cardboard boxes is going to be driven at a speed of 60 kilometers an hour. Do you think they'll stop before they hit it?
Okay, I'm good to go. As always, I'll be doing the driving challenge first to prove it can be done. Beside me today is our driving teacher, Scott Marshall. Scott's figured out the distance it takes to stop in these conditions, and when we're that far away from the wall, he'll turn on the red light that's mounted to the dash. That will be the driver's cue to lock up the brakes.
160.
Yo! He flashed on the red light and, oh, come on, Ice. Scott, you know your business, baby.
Installed.
I'm done. She learned her lesson. Next up is Chris. Just driving this huge Mercury in a straight line is a challenge for him.
There he goes. Oh, lock it up, buddy. Lock it up. Yes!
You stopped, man.
Okay, so what?
Is there a control issue that you have with somebody else telling you when to stop?
Yeah, I definitely don't like that.
You're the one in control, so...
Technically, yeah, because I'm the one driving.
Will Chris show the same degree of common sense?
Wow.
Oh, there's something to be said for his cautiousness.
Do you really need a red light to tell you not to run into a wall? No, you don't.
True.
You don't. Some of our contestants do. The challenges are over, and Canada's worst drivers are about to have their performances evaluated by our team of experts.
This is not fun.
All the experts fear that Chris's wife, Michelle, is making a bad driver worse.
I hate to say this, but I don't think your wife's helping you because she's laughing at you, telling you that you're an idiot. And I don't think that's the stuff that you should have in the car, because it's all it does is it beats you down and makes you less secure about what you're doing.
When Canada's worst drivers make sudden moves on the road, braking constantly and swerving erratically, they often don't even realize they're driving badly. We think they should know, which is why we've rigged up this. This car has a tank on its roof. The tank will be this full of water and has these beautiful toilet pipes coming out that ultimately funnel right onto the driver and the nominators' heads. If the driver moves the car fluidly, they'll be able to get out dry. However, if they get the water in this tank sloshing, this is going to be a lesson that will soak through even the thickest skull. To show the course can be driven without getting too wet, I'm going to do it first.
The key to driving this course successfully is going to be going smooth and even. It's going to... Whoa! Big pop-up comes out, so we just wait for him to go away. And turn around here, in between the mess of cars. Okay, we've got our slow driver in front of us now. Course turns into a U-turn right here. Don't want to get the water sloshing too much. Oh, look at it bounce up there. Yeah, we got a road rager behind us. Whoa, and a big tire coming out in front. There's a few people I can see just driving through this stuff, knocking it everywhere. And that should just about do it. Ahead screaming through the finish line, and I'm done. What's my time?
5 minutes and 10 seconds.
5 minutes and 10 seconds. And I'm not that wet. Now let's see how the worst drivers in Canada make out. There's low confidence, there's no confidence, and then there's Chris.
I can count probably on one hand how many times I've driven in a car in the last 12 years. I just feel way too anxious and stressed with driving a car.
Many of our students believe they are good drivers.
Oh my.
Not Chris.
This is impossible. What are you talking about?
Not impossible.
With the precision of a chainsaw, Chris chews his way through.
Not good. Not good.
No.
Son of a motherless goat.
No, back up. Follow that way.
Our experts think Michelle is part of Chris's problem. Chris denies that.
Both Michelle and I are impressed by the whole setup in terms of what they're trying to get across. And she's happy to be here. She's happy to see me grow in terms of my driving skill.
Nobody can get by that. No one.
No, what do you mean? No, you stupid.
Oh,
Language.
his wife.
Watching Chris destroy the back half of this course makes me think he's given up and is crashing into obstacles on purpose.
I can't get the key out.
6:34 is not bad though, but at the end you were just fed up, eh? Just running over stuff.
No,
Let me out of here.
trying. That's what's killing me.
I was trying, actually. I really...
Canada's worst drivers have proven they're in the dark on a lot of issues. Tonight, they're in the dark in a car. It's not that hard. I'll show you. Okay, this is the Nighttime Skills Challenge. Many Canadians who have been in nighttime driving accidents claim the moose appeared from nowhere. That, of course, is never true. Moose just stand there. Cars appear from nowhere. There's one now, flashing his high beams. If our drivers let that distract them, they'll run down this pedestrian. Next, a moose appears from nowhere. Shoo, moose, go on. Honk your horn, and the moose will move. Now things get cruel. Sometimes at night, roads and alleys aren't as they appear. So through no fault of their own, our drivers will be funneled into this dead end, which they'll have to back out of. If frustration kicks into high gear here, we could be stuck in this narrow space all night. Using common sense though, drivers should be out in 1 minute. Heading for the finish line, hoping that nothing else pops out of me. And there I am done. And that's nighttime driving skills.
You go, girl.
Thank you, darling.
Someone else with no confidence is Chris. However, Chris shouldn't have confidence because he has zero skill.
Nice and smooth.
Well, that just blinded the living crap out of me.
He doesn't even know how to flash his high beams back at the driver who just blinded him.
I can't see. So now what? Okay, so I see Buddy, I've stopped.
For some reason, Chris has gone to the very end of the dead end. Oh! Now he's stuck.
That was not good.
Chris tries to get out on his own, but it doesn't work. He tries following Michelle's advice. That doesn't work. After 47 minutes of going nowhere fast, he finally gives up.
I can't get this thing out of here.
You can't get this thing out of here? What should we do?
Well, why don't you let him try to talk you through it? If I'm clearly not successful, why don't you try somebody else? See if that will work.
And with that, I hop into the shotgun seat. It isn't pretty. Chris struggles to follow my instructions. Sometimes I have to give the instructions twice because he simply doesn't understand. It's quite exasperating, actually. Just before we're about to starve to death, Chris sees the light and gets out.
All right.
Home free. Congratulations. Oh, you're in reverse. There you go. Now he's finally moving forward again. Huh? Good man. You didn't give up. Which is half the battle.
We were right underneath.
You're done. Finished. Finish. You're done. Yep. Park it right here and you're good. He got out!
You did it! All by yourself! Woohoo!
You got out of the dead end.
Eventually.
I tell you, you showed heart, man. You showed patience. You showed that you wanted to get out of there. Like, a lot of people would have walked away from that situation.
Yeah, I was embarrassed. I was frustrated. I was really trying hard not to get real angry. I mean, I could have
Were
very
you telling
easily.
yourself, like, I'm incompetent, I'm not good at this?
More a sense of disbelief that I couldn't figure my way out.
And Chris also has some issues that he has to deal with psychological to get to a comfort zone. Once he gets to a comfort zone, then he can start learning.
Well, Chris has bigger issues than psychological. The man doesn't know how to drive. We got a lot of people that are really bad drivers.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to drive. He's actually in a different position than
He
our
is.
drivers.
I believe
I
he
think
is.
so that Chris is the kind of person for whom it's a skill-based issue more. And confidence. Yes. The confidence is definitely needed, but he shouldn't have confidence at this point because he doesn't have the skill.
We've reached the end of our second show, which means it's time for the most improved motorist here to graduate and leave the Driver Rehabilitation Center. Who will it be? Has anyone really improved enough that they should be allowed to be released back into the flow of life's normal traffic? Chris. You've shown us that you can get into some pretty sticky situations, but you cannot get out of the Driver Rehabilitation Center until you can back your own way out of your own jam. And I'm sure you'll figure that out.
Life at our Driver Rehabilitation Center is nothing like the flashy and congested urban life our nominees left behind.
Most urbanites think that driving through country farmland is relaxing, easy. They even think that dealing with roaming animals is fun. That is pure bull. As Canada's worst drivers are about to find out.
This is the Farmyard Challenge. As usual, I'll be driving the course first. We start off by reversing through this hallway of hay.
Don't want to hit that ladder, I'm fine, I think.
Which leads to our intimidating slalom course.
Now there's jagged bits of metal sticking everywhere.
This challenge is all about tight maneuvering in an unfamiliar environment. The reversing section ends when I successfully slip between these two parked cars.
No problem. And that gets us halfway through the challenge, and then we come back through it again forwards.
The hallway of hay bales now funnels me into this quaint dirt road to nowhere.
Ah, nice and relaxing.
Hold your horses. I'm about to get sandwiched.
So when we get the big farm machine coming at us, it's time to reverse out of the way.
Next, release the mutton.
Whoa, we got sheep action behind us. Well, I'm gonna have to give David Chow a lecture that if he hears metal scraping on sheep, he has to stop. Okay, I guess I'll tuck back into the barn here to let the farm machine pass. And I'm on my way again. And that is the Farmyard Challenge.
Chris is our only nominee who's never caused an accident. But that's because in 13 years of having a license, he only ever drove 4 times.
I might be Canada's worst driver because if I get out on the road, I have the full capacity to possibly kill someone.
Good boy, stay.
Chris's wife, Michelle, probably isn't helping by speaking to him like he's a dog.
Down.
I hate to say this, but I don't think your wife's helping you because she's laughing at you, telling you that you're an idiot. All it does is it beats you down and makes you less secure about what you're doing.
I really don't know whether there's any aspect of my personality that might impede Chris's driving. I want to help him and I want to take over and I want to just do it, but I know that that's not why I'm here.
So, can Michelle change her ways when Chris is behind the wheel? Chris starts out this morning happily accepting his wife's praise, but he still runs into things.
I don't know what just happened there, but...
You hit the ladder that's in front of you.
Michelle is not scaring Chris today, and her pleasant disposition does seem to be helping.
There you go. Beauty. You're okay, you're okay, you're okay.
Chris's car control is obviously improving.
Forward, baby.
Forward.
You didn't do too bad. You all proud of yourself?
This could be due to Michelle's rosy demeanor, or it could be the result of his recent lessons. Or it could be a fluke.
Oh, son of a gun, what was that?
That was the bar sticking out there.
Chris is better, but he would still be an expensive disaster in a crowded parking lot.
Oh, you did good backing up. I'm very
That's twice now. Yeah. That's twice now. That's good. Now what? What, backwards? You gotta be kidding me. What bloody country are we in? Sheep, for crying out loud.
They've got a long way to go, but it is encouraging to see this couple headed in the right direction.
Oh, I think it's getting better. I know it's getting better. It's not perfect. I still got to do little steps here and there, but so that I don't hit anything. Because, I mean, the point is not to hit anything. So we're not at 100% yet.
If you realize you're driving in the wrong direction and there's not enough room to do a U-turn, your next best bet is to do a 3-point turn. It's totally legal, it's totally safe, but if you're one of Canada's worst drivers, it's totally frustrating. We're challenging our drivers to get up on this platform, do a 3-point turn, then drive off again. For guidance, we've put buckets of water on the edge to help them figure out exactly where the drop-off is.
And this is the 3-point turn of frustration. So you come up on the ramp like this, knock that water butt over to Kingdom Come, get over that way, all I can go, and then I come this away. Make this all the way to the right. We're gonna touch that and then drape just our left wheel ever so slightly off the edge. Like right there. Go, now we're turning the wheel. We're backing up. We're turn number 2. Getting that water bottle right there. And now, turn number 3. Ooh, she's tight, but not all that frustrating. This is the event we call the 3-point turn of frustration. What happens is, you're gonna drive up onto this platform, you're gonna perform a 3-point turn on the platform in the same way you came on, except you're always going to be going frontwards. Around the perimeter of the platform, you can see these white buckets. They're not, they're actually aids for you to know where the edge is so you don't take your vehicle off the edge. Clock is on.
All right.
It's the 3-point turn of frustration.
Let's do it.
Enjoy.
No one's got much faith in Chris. After all, this is a man who was stuck for almost a half hour last episode trying to back out of a simple dead end.
Holy crap. I don't know. This is going to be more of a 4-point. Not exactly what I really wanted to do.
But he doesn't do too badly at all, pulling it off in 5 turns.
All right, Chris, you did a good job.
She's pretty relaxed and easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now, let's...
She didn't laugh at me.
Well, I got off.
There you go. You should be proud.
There you go. Now,
Oh, very
now, is there a
nice.
connection?
That was very nice.
That was
Positive
much
feedback?
better.
Better performance?
Oh, that was fine, although technically I think that was more a 4-point.
I believe we counted 5.
Okay, 5.
In a space this size, you can drape the front of your car and the back of your car well off this platform before your wheels get to the edge.
Yeah.
So the only way to get there and figure this one out is to actually strike and move those barrels with your machine.
Remember what Scott told you.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to...
Can Chris reduce his 5-point turn down to a 3-point turn? There's 1 turn. This is 2.
I think one just went off.
His 3rd turn looks a little wide.
No.
If Chris was a gymnast, this dismount would break his ankle.
3 points.
That's an ugly 3-point turn, but that's a 3-point turn, baby. That's a 3-point turn, and you're out.
Thank you very much.
However, it's not Chris's behavior that's impressing our experts.
We might have been a little bit hard on your wife in the previous episode. We were talking about how there seemed to be some dynamics going there that didn't seem to be helping your driving. And we couldn't help but notice the positive feedback she was giving you in the 3-point turn and how much better you did. But that was quite a remarkable turnaround. And maybe that's reflecting your own improved confidence.
Every day in Canada, drivers fly past each other with only a hair's breadth of space separating them from total calamity. Safe high-speed driving basically boils down to understanding exactly how much space you have to work with. And that is a skill that is seriously lacking in Canada's worst drivers. Teaching them this lesson on the highway would obviously be an act of complete irresponsibility, but not teaching the lesson would be a dereliction of duty. So, we've come up with this cunning plan. We call this challenge the Eye of the Needle. Basically, it goes like this.
Canada's worst drivers have to hold a steady course between these cones. After the cones come the boxes. Finally, the drivers should pass unscathed through the Eye of the Needle.
I hope we've got enough boxes, because this is going to get ugly.
Are you ready?
Heading into this challenge, Chris is a strong contender to be the most improved driver this show. Let's see how he handles the Eye of the Needle at 40 kilometers an hour.
Little faster, little faster, little faster, little faster, little faster. Okay.
First class. At 50, though, Chris gets excited and gives the car too much gas. With less time to correct steering, Chris runs amok.
You're doing over 60.
Some people can't chew gum and walk. Chris can't look at his dashboard and steer straight.
How's that for you, Chris?
Oh, that was fine. And I was trying to look at the speedometer, and I got to 50, and I stopped looking at it, and I tried to hold my foot, and I guess with the pedal and my foot wasn't used to it, so I know I crept up in the speed and sideswiped a few things there, but...
For his final run at 60 or above, Chris decides to really test himself. He wants to go 70 kilometers an hour.
Alrighty, you're at 60. You're at 60. Okay, stop!
Michelle has recently been resisting the urge to laugh at her husband.
Oh, that was bad. The damn car drifted.
Yeah.
There was a potential for bodily function to be lost, I think. Most definitely.
Seeing this wreckage makes Chris think he should stay in quarantine.
I would probably want a little more training just for highway stuff, because I'm still kind of little bit edgy when it comes to high speeds. 80 so far seems to be my limit. And I know you can't really do that on highways, so you have to get up to speed.
Reversing. You've seen other motorists do it. Maybe you've even tried it yourself. But when Canada's worst drivers look over their shoulder, all they see is trouble. To teach the fine art of reversing, our team of designers is building a winding hallway of obstacles that Canada's worst drivers will have to reverse through in this full-size pickup truck.
So this is the all-reverse challenge. First of all, we take it back through these sawhorses. Take a wide one to go through the garage. Going over the icy snow, being careful not to hit those pylons. Now we back through the 4 cars and into the hallway of hay bales. Thread the needle on these 4 car wrecks into the home garage. And that's just how simple the reverse challenge is.
Worst driver nominee Chris got his license when he was a teenager, but then only drove 4 times in 13 years. Recently, he demonstrated his reversing skills to us by taking 47 minutes to back out of a simple dead end.
Nothing strange, nothing out of the ordinary, except the fact that I will be in that car trying to annoy the living hell out of it. Okay?
To keep his wife from grabbing the wheel or lashing out at her husband, we're giving Michelle something fragile to hold on to, namely a bowl of goldfish.
Oh, let's annoy the hell out of it.
Remember what you're supposed to be doing, Chris.
Yeah, I know.
Chris says he knows, but he don't know squat. It's a fiasco before he's even out of the gates.
Chris,
Yes, dear?
you're a little bit caught up.
Oh.
Chris is like an animal caught in a trap. He'd chew his own leg off to get out of here right now. Too many of our drivers do exactly what Chris just did. They line something up, they hit it, then they keep on going.
It's how you're mirrored, because I'm thinking you're not seeing very well from there. You're starting to get closer, getting closer, getting closer.
Last episode, Michelle was accused of being too hard on her husband. Today, she's trying to keep calm, but she's already put the goldfish on the floor.
You have to pay attention to both sides of the car.
Her frustration builds as Chris hits things on both sides of the truck at the same time.
Can you see out the mirrors, Chris? Have you been looking at your mirrors at all?
No.
Carnage, thy name is Chris.
Oh, what you hitting?
Crap.
Oh, there's a light missing. Just happened.
It's official. Chris can't go backwards. Unable to think for himself, he follows Michelle's exact directions. He does make it to the end of the course, but he doesn't really know how he did it.
I wouldn't do that with my Lexus, that's for sure, if I own one.
Reversing was just a nightmare.
Yeah, it was.
What happens is the anxiety takes over, and in that heightened state of anxiety, you can't see what you know anymore.
Bad drivers are often asked, "What are you, blind?" Good drivers not only look at where they're going, they see well into the future, determining what moves they'll make once they get there. Our next challenge will dramatically intensify the need for good visualization and communication, because the driver will be in the passenger seat, and the person behind the wheel will be as blind as a bat. All right, we're about to do the blindfold challenge. Heather will be actually touching the wheel, but I will be driving from the passenger seat. It should be quite the ride.
The course begins with a gentle slalom between pedestrians.
Keep on going, slow down.
Then it's a simple straight line. Just don't veer off a centimeter or things will start to topple.
Go forward, go forward, go forward, go forward, go forward, and put it in reverse. We're gonna back into the driveway. That's right, you're doing the exact right thing. Keep on doing that, keep on doing that, keep on doing it. Now stop, and we're in.
Wow.
Piece of cake. And that is how you do the blindfold challenge.
Am I in park?
You're in park, yep.
Next up, Chris and his wife, Michelle. Even blindfolded, Michelle can see more than Chris.
Keep going.
All right, here's stuff on the other side, Chris. You watching? Perhaps not?
Clearly, the blind leading the blind.
It used to be that you drove the car. You changed the gears. You were an integral working part of the machine. Then along came automatic transmission, which basically turned cars into giant go-karts with just 2 pedals. Stop, start, that's it. Now, any idiot can operate a moving vehicle, which might help explain why our driving skills are so bad. We thought it was high time we turned the clock back to the clutch-burning days of yesteryear. The next challenge for Canada's worst driver? Stopping and starting a manual 5-speed stick-shift sedan on a cheeky little hill. Not every idiot can do that. The purpose of this challenge is to teach clutch control. To make this challenge a little bit more doable for our students, Scott is in the car with them. The students are going to have to ride the clutch right here. They're allowed to use the brake to get to this stop point, but once they stop, they have to just use the friction of the clutch to hold them on the hill. As they approach up the hill, an annoying little car is going to be doing a slow 3-point turn right in front of them. Once again, ride the clutch. Don't stall, and make the car stop. No brakes allowed.
And that's just the first part. For the second half of the challenge, Canada's worst drivers will have to do the same thing while stuck between a tailgater and a truck. 4 out of 6 of our drivers have never driven a standard before. So, to keep the tears to a minimum, our instructor Scott Marshall is giving lessons in clutch control. As you'd expect, most of them are fine once they get going, but taking off usually involves a little hiccup. First up is Chris. He understands the instructions, he gives the car some gas, he eases up on the clutch, and he's off. Skill or beginner's luck? Well, he makes it past the flagman with barely a stutter. Near the top, though, he stalls and can't get started again. He can't hold his ground either. Here comes stall number 5, 6, 7. Chris drifts backwards all the way down the hill. On his 11th attempt, he finally gets his butt in gear.
Stay with the gas.
I can change gears while we're moving. It's the stopping and starting that's the problem.
Let's see how he does with a truck in front of him.
All right, so I'm gonna put it in the first, and then, uh-oh.
Michelle should have worn her neck brace. At every lurch, she flails and snaps like a rag doll.
Whoa.
To put it literally, Chris's driving stinks.
I know exactly what burning clutch smells like, and it's something that I don't ever want to smell very often, frankly. That was nasty. Very nasty.
Canada's worst drivers are constantly worried about running into something with their car. Now they're going to be worried about running into something with their snowmobile. Let me out of here. I've been pretty confident about every challenge so far, but even this one has me nervous. I've never towed a trailer before, ever. Now the whole secret of this, when you're going forward, is to take wide turns, and you'll thread the needle every time. We'll get to the backwards part in a minute. Since our drivers are still struggling with the simple mechanics of steering, we're hoping that complicating matters with a trailer will focus their thinking. Then when the trailer comes off, they should be better drivers. That marks the end of the forward part. And here's where things get wonky. To make the trailer go where you want it to, you gotta turn the wheels in the opposite direction. This is the part I haven't been looking forward to. Reversing the trailer down an icy boat ramp just screams jackknife to me. I'll explain jackknifing later. Once you get to here, backing it up should be a straightforward event. Now, Chris. He got his license 13 years ago, but then lost his nerve and stopped driving. So Chris, here you go. You're in a rear-wheel drive sports car, you got a trailer, you're going down that-a-way. Michelle's gonna be out of the vehicle for this. She'll direct you from outside, let you know how much space you have.
All right.
Have a good run. The clock is on. Be safe, hit nothing.
Thank you.
Chris is serious about becoming a good driver. He's taking our private lessons, he's practicing fundamentals, and he's starting to believe in himself.
Straight.
On the forward section, Chris gets through without a hitch. Now for the dicey part. Chris is famously bad at reversing. In our second show, he spent 45 minutes trying to back out of a dead end. And when he reversed our pickup truck, well, he went backwards all right.
Can you see out the mirrors, Chris? Have you been looking at your mirrors at all?
No.
Now with the trailer behind him, Chris is in a quandary.
Chris?
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Well, I'm trying to get the ass end turned around.
You're gonna hit the tires!
What? What tire?
Pull up and start again.
What tire?
Chris is another driver who forgets his front end when reversing.
You see where your trailer is?
Yeah, I know, but I got a problem here.
You want your trailer pointing that way, right?
Yeah.
Chris knows what he needs to do, but he has no idea how to do it. He starts to jackknife in attempt after attempt. It looks like the tail is wagging the dog.
I'm still trying to get used to turning the wheel the right way to get the back end view. It's like totally opposite.
Very good. Get your skidoo in the water, sir. Chris has been niggling around for nearly 20 minutes, and sheer mental exhaustion is taking its toll on his decision-making.
No.
Wrong way, some of the time.
Pull forward a little bit.
After nearly 25 minutes, Chris slides down the ramp, looking like he'd rather slide into bed for a week's recovery. I have some shocking news for you.
What's that?
That's the cleanest back end of the day.
It gave me a split in migraine, but yeah, I guess I did it.
Did you really? Did that hurt you?
My head hurts.
You did good.
I tried.
You did good. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. To avoid awkward incidents in parking lots, you actually need more than good driving skills. You need good manners. If two people see the exact same spot at the exact same time, who owns it?
Welcome, folks. Take a look behind you. This is our version of a mall parking lot, okay? Like a normal mall parking lot, you might have to wait for spaces, okay?
Our 5 nominees will be duking it out for 2 spots, here and here. After that, 2 more spaces will open up when a couple of shoppers return to their cars. 4 spaces, 5 bad drivers. Who will be the odd one out?
Be courteous and just get parked and everything will be good. What we're gonna do is these vehicles behind you are yours to drive. Obviously, some of these vehicles are gonna be easier to park than others. The big old green Grand Marquis could have some issues. So this is the way you pick. Reach in there, grab a golf ball.
Chris, it's a good thing you know how to drive, buddy, because you got the big old station wagon. Please remember, parking is a destination, not a contest. Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. Go! Jennifer immediately leaps out and sprints to the nearest spot.
Oh, she's run out to grab a spot. Look at this.
Yeah, but she didn't pick a very good one.
Jen nearly gets run over while getting in position to be run over. Who would want to stand off against a station wagon? Or against Chris's wife?
Oh, Michelle's figured this out. All right.
So competitive.
Once the tanks roll in, Madalena can only watch as Chris slips into the vacancy.
Damn it! If they can aggressive.
I've never seen in my whole life of mall shopping somebody take somebody's spot when they're standing in it. Like, that is against mall shopping. That's like rule number 4.
To find out if any of our drivers are hardwired to crash into things, we've enlisted the help of research scientist Christina Fogg. We check reflexes, eyesight, peripheral vision, hand-eye coordination, and hearing.
So that wasn't too bad. Chris actually did reasonably well, but his peripheral vision was slightly less than your average person. So 172. If he's looking at the oncoming traffic, he's not going to be able to see maybe that car that's coming out from the side.
Canada's 5 worst drivers are starting to hate the rehab center. They want to graduate and go home.
If I have to stay here till the end, then fine, but I really don't want to.
Gossip is starting to fly around the Driver Rehabilitation Center. 5 shows ago when we began, there was a unifying camaraderie amongst the nominees for Canada's worst driver. Now, there is rumor and judgment. None of these 5 individuals believe they could possibly be the most dreadful motorist in the entire nation, but one of them is dead wrong. And Chris, oh man, I love you, but you know, in the actually, let's talk about the parking lot. Let's not, just forget it. You're having too much trouble driving. You can't do it. A simple driver's license enables you to operate a dizzying array of vehicles. Without any extra education or certification, even Canada's worst drivers can walk proudly into a rental shop and say, I need to work on my high-speed reversing, so I'm going to take the 7-meter-long cube truck, please.
I drove a truck like this from Nova Scotia to Newfoundland once, but that's my only experience with something this big.
Key to making it through this challenge safely is use your mirrors. This is a giant big truck. You gotta know your corners, you'll be fine.
To keep this moving truck moving, we're giving our students a 20-minute time limit.
Come through the orange markers, through the cars, no sweat.
I don't want to be late, so I step on it and humiliate myself. So far on Canada's Worst Driver, I've run every course cleanly, but trying to back up this big truck has me with one foot in my mouth.
Now I don't even know where I'm going. Where am I supposed to go? I gotta get out and check the course here. Sometimes it gets confusing.
I wish I had someone outside to guide me.
Big stack of tires on one side, white car on the other. Everything slides by just fine.
Without a guide, I finish in less than half the time allowed, but with one embarrassing hit.
9 minutes and 34 seconds. Let's see how the worst drivers in Canada do.
Next in the belly of the beast, Chris. Chris got his license when he was 19, but when we met him, he'd only ever used it a handful of times.
I feel way too anxious and stressed with driving a car.
We all feel anxious when Chris drives. Even the car feels stress.
Get out. Give me a break. Is that within my license?
Absolutely.
Driver's licenses are different in every province, but across Canada, anyone with a full standard license can legally rent and drive this vehicle.
Go. I think I've changed in terms of my general focus of what's kind of going on around me now.
You have to put it in gear, Chris.
Oh yeah, gear. That would help. I think I've started to understand now where I look. I think I've been able to focus a lot more on the road.
You know the idea is not to hit anything, right?
Well, I know, but
okay. No, I'm just...
No, I know.
With Michelle beside him, Chris can't get a handle on what's behind him. To line up the truck for the reversing section, he just points the wheel in the general direction he wants to go and hopes for the best.
Oh, that was noisy. Oh, there we go.
I hate when that happens.
Time's over.
I think I'll be hiring help next time.
For the safety of our nation, Canada's worst drivers are being quarantined just outside Picton, Ontario. After undergoing a series of fully isolated driving challenges, though, it's time to start slowly reintegrating them back into the flow of life's normal traffic.
Today, we're letting them back out onto the public roads. There's a lot to hit out there. $8,000 paint jobs, pedestrians, stop signs. This is the real world. And Canada's worst drivers have made it very clear that in that universe, they are totally lost.
We're bringing our dubious motorists to Picton, Ontario, because the citizens here drive graciously in a non-threatening manner. This challenge will teach our bad drivers the importance of planning. I will give them each 10 clear and simple directions leading them to a specific location. That's it. 10 turns, no twist.
Take the first left after the crosswalk. The first right turn near a white house. Turn left at the Shire Hall.
The challenge ends if and when they manage to arrive at local landmark, the Crystal Palace. Next up is Chris. When I give him the directions, he's content on marking them not on paper, but on his brain. Apparently what's under that orange hat is clever enough to remember 10 random turns on streets Chris has never heard of.
Got it one more time? Are you good?
I think we're good.
Okay, Chris. That's your signal.
Before long, though.
The directions I gave you were follow that street until it ends, turn right, then you'll be on the street that snakes around. Ah, okay. You want me to continue the directions with you from here?
Well, let me just remember for a minute. So,
Will he write it down this time?
and then all I have to do is go back out and go this way, and I'm back on my course.
You are absolutely right, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And once again, I got a piece of paper, I got a pen, I got it all there waiting for him. No, he doesn't need it. He thinks he's good to go.
Now after King,
What did he tell you, Chris?
I can't remember now.
No, you have no idea where you're going?
No, now I have no idea where I'm going.
You should be embarrassed.
Surely he'll write it down this time.
Left at the Shire Hall, and then you just keep going straight until you come to the Crystal Palace. You'll see it on your left.
Got it, okay.
No problem.
Thanks a lot.
No sweat. He's gone down the wrong street. He took his first stop sign instead of his second.
But what are you supposed to do after you...
It was supposed to be make a left.
Where is it written that a man is measured by his ability to get from A to B without writing anything down?
Crapola.
Ah, the Canadian winter. The imposing machinery. The dead car batteries. The never-ending hardships sometimes keep bad drivers from driving at all. No such luck today, though. Our hapless grocery getters are going to have to overcome every fresh hell this season throws at them. Okay, that was in the head. We call this challenge going to the store to buy milk in February. If you live in Winnipeg, you'll just have to pretend like we plugged the block heater in. In this challenge, Canada's worst drivers will have to start by shoveling their way out. Then they'll discover they have a dead battery. But they've got jumper cables in the back, and I'm sitting right here in my trusty wheels, ready, willing, and able to give them a boost.
Once they dig their prized car out, they'll have to get her going and safely make their way over or through this chunky, icy snowbank. Then it's a dance through the slalom before arriving at our second snowbank, which blocks access to Canada's worst bridge. Once our drivers get their milk, it's just a matter of going home and parking. First to make the milk run is Chris.
Well, maybe not in front of the car.
This challenge is all about car care, and Chris certainly cares.
Oh, Chris, he's so thorough. He's wiping off the lights.
If Chris were to attempt driving the vehicle out instead of shoveling, it could damage the transmission. And in a tempo of this age, that would mean a repair bill of $1,200. If time is money, shoveling snow saves cash by the scoop.
The moment of truth. Let's see how long it takes Chris to figure out his battery's dead.
The car's not starting. Why is the car not starting?
Still not going so good.
Can you give me a hand? Give me a boost? I think my battery's dead.
Yeah, sure.
When his car wouldn't start, Chris pulled the headlight knob, hoping it was the choke.
Chris?
A device that hasn't been used now for a good, 15 years?
Chris?
Look at him. Now he's choking trying to open the hood.
Just pop mine for your hand. There's mine up.
Shaw, how do you open her hood? Oh, it's on that side.
Uh-oh. Jumper cables. This looks like a blueprint for disaster.
Step one, positive.
I'm not supposed to help, but I'm losing patience.
Put the black on the black and the red on the red, and then fire up.
Oh, now that'll...
Chris looks confused, and Michelle looks like she's losing patience. The dominant partner gets out to push.
It's like role reversal with the two of them.
I've been back there watching. This is embarrassing. Your husband makes you push, and there's a guy in a truck sitting there waiting.
Chivalry's not dead, but it is driving away without a wife.
And then he leaves you behind.
With Michelle back on board, Chris decides to impress her by going for broke.
Here we go. He's backing up for the big one.
Ready? Yeah? No.
Harder.
This is the first snowbank Chris has ever driven through, and he likes it enough to try the experiment again, which is not good for the car or his wife's chronic neck problem.
Was that homo or 2%, dear?
I think it's homo. You have to go back the way you came.
It has been a sorry string of performances for Chris in this episode. He has no hope of graduating tonight, but he is smart enough to know why.
So how was that for you? Oh, it was fun. It was fun. I'm not sure I would bust through a snowbank if I actually owned this vehicle, but I mean, I probably would have shoveled a little more.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So far, here at the Driver Rehabilitation Center, we have put the worst drivers in Canada through 18 migraine-inducing in-car challenges. And even at this late stage, we still can't tell if that light at the end of the tunnel is hope or a Mack truck bearing down on us. Who will graduate tonight? Are any of these motorists ready? That brings me to the men. Oh, the men. What happened to you this week? Manuel, Chris, you're the brainiacs in the room. But I gotta tell you, boys, I am lost as to how you think you could remember 10 things and not get lost. Write it down. This is not a hard thing to think of. It's ludicrous not writing it down. So write this one down, boys. The male ego is like a slipping clutch. It's dangerous to drive around with. Write that down when you get home. Our driving experts are constantly harping at Canada's worst drivers about how they hold the steering wheel. They should hold it like this, with hands on either side. Not all casual and cruisy like this, not with the wrists through the bottom, but with the hands at 2:45. That way, they're always ready to swerve.
Today's first challenge teaches sudden avoidance while traveling at different speeds. Our students can see the obstacles coming, obviously, but they can't react until our instructor tells them to. The purpose of this challenge is to teach the art of braking, swerving, and skidding. This one course has 3 separate components. In the first section, students must drive 60 kilometers an hour straight at a bull moose. Then, just 14 meters in front of the beast, Scott will instruct them to quickly brake and reduce their speed to 30, then let go of the brake and swerve around the moose. To swerve, you need rolling wheels. Skidding equals crashing. In the second section, the command is to go 30 and swerve just 5 meters in front of the moose. The trick here is to go against your instinct and not touch the brake at all. And third, drive 40 and stop when you're told. Stop.
And that's how you pass swerve school with flying colors. Now let's see how Canada's worst drivers make out.
Next up, Chris.
It's amazing how much there is to learn.
Not good. Not good. How Chris got his driver's license, I'll never know.
Nobody can get by that. No one. This is impossible.
It's not impossible.
Chris needs waterproof pants whenever he drives. He's that scared.
Give it hard. Go. Faster. Faster. Steady your speed. Stop.
Chris way over brakes at the first moose.
Keep going. Gas now. Gas. More.
But at the second moose, he doesn't brake, and his adrenaline surges, causing confusion.
Back in the middle. Look ahead.
Then,
Gas. Go,
the
go,
tension
go,
builds,
go, go, go.
the floodgates open.
Stop.
And Chris has the worst kind of accident.
I think I pissed myself.
The next challenge for Canada's worst drivers is a nighttime scavenger hunt in the dark. They'll drive 30 kilometers around Prince Edward County, going to 4 different locations where they must pick up some obscure local information. First, it's to our hometown of Picton to count the tiers on a cake in a bakery window. Then it's off to Cherry Valley to find out if the door to Rudy's Grocery opens by pushing or pulling. Then they'll follow their nose to the dump and learn the cost of a bulk minimum deposit. They'll finish off at this fancy restaurant where a drink and a taxi will be waiting. All in all, it should be a pleasant 23-minute drive. And what should make it pleasant is that Canada's worst drivers won't be driving. They'll be in the back seat with a map, giving orders.
All right, guys, sometimes when you're driving is not the hardest part of the ordeal. Sometimes figuring out how to get to where you're going is the hard part. This will tell you how to get to where you're going. Here's a map, and just because we were afraid, Manuel, that we might have to give you directions and you'd forget them, we wrote it down for you.
Thank you very much.
All right? You as well.
All right. Now get in your vehicles, please.
We started this challenge at 9 p.m., but for some of our bad drivers, that might be past their bedtime.
I just want to go home. This is way too late. And,
You gonna tell me which way to go, Polly?
Chris sees this scavenger hunt as a potential horror movie. He's deathly afraid of crashing or getting lost or breaking down in the dark. It's irrational.
find a place to park.
Chris has the exact address, but instead of driving to it, he chooses to walk, then run in the wrong direction. On the other hand, Chris enjoys nothing about this night.
Something's not right.
The darkness has Chris so paranoid, he no longer trusts the brand new car we rented for him.
You're in a car that's got thousands of moving parts. So if one moving part screws up and your car stops running, there was nobody around in any of the small towns that we were going through that could help you. No one. We wouldn't have been able to even find someone to ask directions.
Chris has even more university education than Madalena, but he never learned to enjoy cruising at night.
Not knowing where I'm going at night, no people, no facilities. It's a combination of all that. It's not like night driving is impossible. I mean, it's not that at all. It's the combination of all these factors that kind of play into a worst case scenario.
We're gonna drive until we run out of gas. Maybe there'll be a sign from heaven.
Michelle, shut up and drive.
Okay, that'll do it for Chris and Michelle. They arrive at the restaurant, done like dinner. To prepare them for the intensity of Montreal, we're getting doubly serious. This next challenge should teach our drivers the art of staying calm in a heavy situation.
When the nominees for Canada's worst driver took this beautiful pickup truck out on an earlier challenge, they beat it within an inch of its life. Today, it might not survive at all because we're doubling up the potential for grave disaster. Instead of driving with the person who nominated them, we're making the most dim-witted motorists in the country chauffeur each other around.
With two of Canada's worst drivers in the cab together, this challenge will be twice as tricky. And with our added twist, it'll also be twice as long.
The drivers will each run the course 2 times, once with the truck completely empty and once while carrying over a ton of gear in the back.
The loaded down truck will handle much differently than the empty truck, teaching our students what it's like to have limited visibility and unresponsive steering. It's Chris's turn next.
I think you're in a lot better position now.
Manuel directs him out of the gate.
Yeah, stop there, and let's back up a little bit.
And into a jam.
Oh, son of a gun. Yeah. Now he's gone. Oh, well.
After a few scrapes, Chris stops listening to Manuel, and he drives into the parking bay without incident.
He is still a driver.
Chris should be done in a few seconds, but it takes him 4 minutes to park.
Where am I?
You wanna go? No, you wanna clear that bag and then. That's what I'm gonna.
Parking. It stops Chris every time.
And then now turn. Yeah, very good, very good.
Chris finishes with the cleanest run so far, and it goes straight to his head.
Right now, the running for Canada's worst driver, I would say, would have to be Manuel. I do like him a lot, but I would not want to be on the road with him.
Canada's worst driver. It's not the nicest thing to be called.
Do I want that title? No. Do I deserve that title? Maybe.
The Driver Rehabilitation Center has witnessed a gruesome amount of damage during the course of our 7 shows. And as disturbing as it may sound, we are about to graduate one of the 4 remaining nominees for Canada's worst driver. The person who is getting their keys back this week isn't necessarily the best driver here. It's more like they are the least worst. Chris, when we put you through swerve school, you were the only student we had who ran straight into a wall. Enough said.
I'm happy.
But not everyone is celebrating his graduation.
Okay, this is crap. How in the world does somebody like Manuel graduate before I do.
Who sucks more than me? Everybody else.
Granted, I probably should not be on the road yet, but neither should he. Neither should he, not from what I've seen.
If you just look around, look at your average there. Chris, driven 6 or 7 times in 13 years. So you make the math.
No, never.
Montreal lies ahead, but first, one more mega challenge. It's the culmination of everything we've taught our students. We're testing handling skills, spatial awareness, split-second decision-making, observation, and anticipation. All the skills every driver needs to stay safe.
Behind me, construction workers are putting the finishing touches on the most cunning challenge we've ever created. This will be the final exam ever to be held here at the Driver Rehabilitation Center. It's a long and winding challenge designed to be so frustrating that many of our pupils might overheat and even totally seize up. With good reason. After all, a bad performance today could result in a lifetime of humility and red-faced shame. For the biggest challenge of their driving career, we broke the biggest car out of our lot. This course is wider than we make most of them because we're hoping they go fast. We're trying to prepare them for this trip to Montreal.
After the opening straightaway gets their hearts pumping, they'll have to calm down enough to make it through this tight squeeze. Then they have to get up to 60 kilometers an hour while driving between a hallway of hay bales. At the end of the straightaway, an emergency stop is mandatory. Then it's time to reverse. Ramping up the pressure will be our beeping road rager. Reversing this car while being pursued makes me kind of feel like I'm in a 1970s crime series.
Go backwards at a rate of knots. Driving forward is the same as driving backward. Look where you're going and you'll be fine.
Next, it's a tightly measured U-turn through an intimidating hallway of obstacles while still going backward. Slip into a parking spot, turn the wheels hard left, and head forward to thread the eye of the needle. Staying between these boxes, drivers once again have to reach a minimum speed of 60. As they advance, the gaps between the boxes shrink. My adrenaline is surging. The next part of the course tests how well the drivers understand the relationship between momentum and friction. Or, in layman's terms, we're going to see if they can make it through a mud hole. I made it through, did I? Come on, stay going, you. On the last straightaway, there's a door prize no one wants.
If they hit that, they're in deep trouble.
And a puddle that could sink someone.
Big water hazard. Woohoo! Bit of hydroplaning action on the left side. Come around the thing. Our road rager is back. And now run the final little eye of the needle to me. To end this course, they must come to a complete stop with their bumper touching my leg, but breaking no bones. And that is the final exam.
Last and quite possibly least, it's Chris. The graduate at the end of every episode has always been the person who has demonstrated the most improvement. Chris has never fit that description within the confines of a single show.
Oh, that was bad.
But overall, he's definitely our most improved driver. I'm not saying he's good. I'm saying that when he arrived here, he didn't have a single clue.
What you did? Have you been looking at your mirrors at all?
No.
Go! Chris starts his final exam clearly focused. Focused on what? I have no idea. He hits the first set of obstacles in his path. And, let's not forget, Heather and Madalena already widened this section. Now to speed. Chris has displayed several disturbing character traits during his time with us. The most disappointing is that sometimes, when he's doing quite well, one mishap will totally freak him out.
I just turned the wheel totally the wrong way. Just hang on to your neck here.
Then he gets angry, which leads to panic.
Damn it, I keep on drifting.
Sometimes his ineptitude snowballs like a runaway train on a fast track to hell. If Chris doesn't come back to Earth, he's going to be the worst of the worst on this course. And tonight, we're not picking the most improved. We're naming the worst. Going forwards again, Chris gets the car up to 60, but can't for the life of him get it back down to 0. That's been the ugliest bit of driving so far. And now it's time for the mud hole. All in all, though, through here, Chris does fairly well. He swings into the final chute with dramatic flair, he steers clear of all the cameramen, and he slides through cleanly until he brutally hip checks that hay bale.
Whoa.
That hip check killed the car.
Car died!
No, the car didn't die. It was murdered.
Son of a motherless goat.
Just stop the car. Put it on the brake. Okay. Put it in the park.
When Chris gets out, he's got a very bad taste in his mouth.
That sucked.
It did indeed, but you started so well.
I guess.
And once you got thrown, then you were lost, eh?
I got thrown and then nothing was in position.
Chris can't have a meltdown like that in Montreal.
Honestly, like looking at the video, it seemed like after a few things hadn't gone right, you gave up. I hadn't seen it quite at that level ever before. It's sort of like your hands went off the wheel, you were exasperated, and you were kind of disgusted with yourself. So I think that is a real serious problem that you need to work on.
At some point, you've got to be able to suck it up and say, okay, I made a mistake, clean the slate, let's start over.
We're gonna make them drive this car through the downtown core of this city, Montreal, Quebec, a town infamous for its aggressive drivers. Montrealers are renowned for speeding, for tailgating, and for showing no sympathy to the Anglophone half-wits who show up here without any clue about the driving culture. For our 3 final nominees, it's going to be overwhelming, especially when you consider that the person who louses up this experience the most will be forever known as Canada's worst driver.
We don't want Canada's 3 worst drivers to get into an accident, so we've slathered the car they'll be driving with blunt warning signs. We're hoping that when other drivers see this thing coming, they'll get well out of the way. Wouldn't you? Tomorrow, for their final challenge, our nominees for Canada's worst driver will spend at least 45 minutes behind the wheel during rush hour traffic. I'll be in the passenger seat acting as navigator, reading out the directions. Chris is next.
So Chris, this is our chariot. We're going to drive around the streets of Old Montreal. If this course gets done exactly properly, it'll take about 45 or 50 minutes. First instruction is to take a right on St. Paul.
This is pretty much a sensory overload for Chris. Before arriving at the rehab center, Chris had never sat behind the wheel of a car 2 days in a row. Now, he's finally into the rhythm of driving, but Montreal has a beat all of its own.
Okay, buddy, I was patient.
After a little stutter, Chris settles down. Even when he comes across other bad drivers, he keeps his cool.
That's a piece of creative driving that guy did.
I'm loving that.
Chris is confidently keeping up with big city traffic, and he's staying calm around pedestrians.
I'm going to make an observation.
Yes.
After 8 weeks in the driver's rehabilitation center, you seem more comfortable here in Montreal during rush hour than you did on an obstacle course all alone when you first got to the rehab center.
True.
That is true?
True.
You're more comfortable here in rush hour.
We're headed up Mount Royal now, and the next turn is a left.
Whoa. Decision time.
It's not the smoothest ride ever, but Chris gets us up to the lookout without missing a single turn. There's been no moving violations and no freakouts. Wow.
You know what, to be honest, I'm actually kind of surprised. He's doing well, he's not doing very well, but he's compared to the rest of the bad drivers, he's doing very well.
I didn't hit anything, which is good.
Pulling back out into the thick of things, Chris shows us how far his reversing has come since that time he was stuck for 45 minutes in a simple driveway. He looks like the poster boy for stress, but his driving is error-free.
Good move. That is correct. Your next instruction is to turn right on Saint-Denis.
All right.
But that's his left blinker. Does Chris know where he's going?
That's right. You're waiting.
Okay, your instruction there was to go right on Saint-Denis, so you went left.
Oh.
Chris turns onto a 4-lane thoroughfare, heading in the wrong direction. Irrationally, he decides the best way to get back is to turn left into the oncoming traffic.
This is going to be tricky. Straight ahead.
But to keep traffic flowing, left turns aren't allowed on Saint-Denis.
You
You've gone about 2 kilometers past where you had to turn back.
After 8 no turning signs in a row, Chris suddenly realizes he should turn right.
Not good. Yeah, you might want to check your blind spot before you start making the turns.
Yeah.
Especially
that was a cop.
Especially into a cop.
By the time Saint Denis sort of peters out, Chris still hasn't turned.
Well, this doesn't look very smart either.
Instead of pulling a quick U-turn, Chris goes in to explore.
Where is this going? This is going into a bus turnaround. Oh, well. Is there a bus following me? No, there isn't.
No, but there's a giant do not enter sign that says, unless you're a bus, don't come in here that you just drove under.
All Chris has to do now is go straight ahead through the turnaround. But he opts for a 3-point turn, which could lead to a showdown.
Okay, that was curious.
Why would you do that, baby?
Probably should have followed around, seeing as this is one way and here comes a bus. Okay, get ready for excitement.
Undaunted, Chris hits the gas, while my anxiety levels hit an all-time high.
I might not have done it that way.
Chris pulls over to regroup. He's clearly in the danger zone.
The street I just turned off of, which was Saint Denis, and then just continue past Montreal where I was supposed to make that right.
The breather works. Chris calms down enough to drive us back to the street where it all went so horribly wrong.
Okay, back on track.
Michelle sees an orange light and tries to warn Chris. But Chris is missing all the signs.
Okay, man, you're blowing a red light. You just blew through a red light.
Oh, crap.
Yeah, that's not good, Chris.
I'm not supposed to let the driver smell my fear, but I stink at concealing it.
There's a street sign. Where is it? Come on.
Then Chris misses another turn.
Well, hopefully that was it.
To get back on track, he senselessly pulls into a hospital parking lot.
You know that the street you were just on is a one-way. Hey, you're going to just go back onto it the same way.
Oh, that's right.
Which brings us to our second head-to-head showdown with a bus.
I seem to have this thing with buses today.
Well, that was certainly pointless. When Chris gets to his final turn, he cuts off a driver who gestures at us.
Sorry.
I don't think he's saying that Chris is number 1. If I have to pretend like I'm not afraid for much longer, I'm going to explode.
Those checker flags are for you, sir. Pull in right.
Chris started out well, then something just snapped. I'm ready for a beer and a taxi, and Michelle doesn't know whether to laugh or cry.
I'm pleasantly surprised with the things that he has really learned and taken to heart. He's done very well. The rest of them are still pretty frightening.
Thank you very much, Chris. Congratulations. We made it home alive.
All right. That a wrap?
Not a chance.
Well, it's been kind of interesting every time we've sequestered ourselves like this to figure out who we're going to graduate. But today, it's an especially big deal because the person who doesn't graduate is Canada's worst driver.
Well, I don't know that second and third place are necessarily something to be that proud of. And I have to say that given that this was their final series of challenges, all 3 of them making the same mistakes they made in the very first episode.
And Chris gives up so completely, so utterly. Like, this was with the final exam too. He just kind of puts up his hands, and you can just see the sense of failure and the sense of utter, hopelessness. In Chris's defense, I'll say that I think with him it's an experience issue more than anything else.
And Chris has no awareness whatsoever and not much ability, but his attitude too is a little better. So
This hunk of junk trophy is made up of just a few of the perfectly good car parts that were destroyed this semester at the Driver Rehabilitation Center. In just a few short moments, I'm going to shackle this piece of hardware to the soul of Canada's worst driver. But before I hand out the goods, let me just say this. 3 of you people have made dramatic improvements since getting here, but what happened in Montreal was simply inexcusable. And Chris, you almost sideswiped a uniformed police officer, man, in an unmarked car, and luckily, though, you were driving a vehicle so ridiculous that he was too embarrassed to pull you over. It's crunch time. Who is Canada's worst driver? Chris, we gave you
classroom lessons, we gave you in-car lessons, we taught you every way we know how. But still, when you go out onto the public roads, it's clear as a bell that you don't have a clue how to drive. So, it's come to this. We made our final decision based on the last 2 road tests. In the first of those 2 tests, here at the Driver Rehabilitation Center, Chris, you were easily the worst. And Madalena, in Montreal, Chris was also easily the worst. So I'm sorry, but here's what's gonna happen. Madalena, I'm gonna give you back your keys. I'm not going to graduate you, but I am going to say that you're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Chris, buddy, I'm really sorry, but you will recognize this as your key, and I'm not going to give it back to you.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm going to leave it right there. And now it is my duty to say, you are Canada's worst driver. Come on, buddy, I'll walk you out of here. Let's go.
Hi, honey. It's me. How are you? That's good. Guess who you're talking to? Canada's worst driver. Stop laughing.
Oh, Chris.
And Chris, well, he's done a little bit of city driving.
You good boy, stay.
But he's still far too terrified to venture back onto the highway. Chris Ferguson, Canada's worst driver, but a great sport.
Stop laughing.
One of those 9 people is Canada's worst driver ever.
Is it Chris? Canada's worst driver from season 1?
Son of a motherless goat. Before your rehabilitation can start, you're going to have to get yourself to the rehab center. And to do that, you just need to follow the directions that are in these envelopes.
This year, the Driver Rehabilitation Center is located, once again, in the Dunnville, Ontario airport. And to get there from where they are now should take the bad drivers a little over an hour. They'll have to go along a highway, through a tunnel, and across some train tracks. Stinking of booze on the morning you're supposed to drive yourself to rehab is an outlandishly irresponsible way to start this season. But at least Angeline is acknowledging how dangerous she is.
I like that you're turning a new leaf and you don't want to drive. I think this is a wise choice.
Luckily, Chris has agreed to take her to rehab. Chris was the first ever Canada's worst driver.
How was that for you?
Well, I mean, appropriate for the time, but not anymore.
When we met Chris in season 1, he had almost no experience behind the wheel. 8 years later, though, Chris is driving like a veteran.
Oh, right now it's relatively rudimentary.
That means the last car to arrive
That was the best drive I've ever had to rehab.
belongs to Chris, Canada's first worst driver.
Canada's worst driver no more.
I don't think so.
Chris seems to now be an average driver. The first challenge our Camaro will be used for is our annual assessment challenge. It starts with a simple reverse that goes around one bend through a hallway of rims. Then, drivers must get the vehicle turned around in this concrete area before they have to gear up to 50 kilometers an hour for a simple slalom run. And that's it. I'll show you how easy it is.
The assessment challenge starts with a fairly simple short reverse.
Using my side mirrors, I go straight back to the sharp turn in the road, where to get through cleanly, drivers have to slightly reposition themselves with an S-turn.
Use your mirrors, folks. It's how you get around these tight spaces.
Once I get through the rims and enter the concrete section, I have to get turned around.
This is going to involve a little bit of inching back and forth, and back and forth inching is fine.
In fact, it's the only way to get the car turned around in this confined space.
Holy tight.
Once I do get turned around, I head for the exit.
And when I squeeze through it,
Yeah, baby.
it's time for the slalom.
Wow, this thing gets to 50 fast. There she is. Whoa. Light touch. Don't stare at the things you want to avoid. Stare at the space you want to go. And that is how you do that. Piece of cake. Yeah. Sometimes my job is fun.
Up next is Chris, who will have me as his passenger. On the simple reverse lane,
This is looking not bad so far.
Chris drives perfectly. In the turnaround section, Chris drives... well, not perfect.
No.
And in the slalom, Chris drives absolutely perfectly.
Piece of cake.
So far, Chris is easily the best driver here.
I don't think you're Canada's worst driver ever.
I don't think so either.
It's time to decide who will be the first Canada's Worst Driver Ever nominee to graduate and go home.
Who's it gonna be, Tim?
Chris.
Shamla?
I'm going to go with Chris. Yeah, I think he's definitely, in terms of all the drivers that we have here, he's the most skilled.
Most skilled, most confident.
Well, I think Chris is obvious.
Philippe?
Well, I was going to say Chris.
Well, I see your point with Henrietta for the amount of driving that she's doing, but I still stick with Chris.
There's nothing that says we have to graduate people. We don't have to do anything. We can do what's right.
Well,
So
and I
you-
think what's right is to graduate Chris.
That's 2 votes to graduate Chris.
There is one person amongst you who has demonstrated enough skill to be our first graduates. And that person is Canada's Worst Driver Season 1, Chris Ferguson. Way to go, sir. You're not Canada's worst driver ever.
I don't think so.
When we met Chris 8 years ago, he really was Canada's worst driver.
I think I pissed myself.
But now he's shown us beyond a shadow of a doubt that he deserves to graduate from our rehabilitation center.
I am the #1 graduate, and I'm bringing sexy back behind the wheel.
Congratulations, Chris.
Is